Good morning, good evening, good night, or stay awake for the next 45 to 50 minutes while we continue our workshop series on cardiometabolic health. Thank you for joining us wherever you are, in bed or sitting with your friends or running a watch party. Thank you. We appreciate you joining. As I just said, we are continuing again today with our cardiometabolic series. And specifically today, I will just touch again on the diagnostics, just some issues around diagnostics, and then most of the conversation will be about lifestyle interventions to manage underlying cardiovascular risk. So my name is Charles Sine. I'm the CEO of Anti-Fragility Health. Thank you for joining. The purpose of why we run these workshops is so that we educate our customers. Because when we know that when people have knowledge, then they are empowered to take action, and those actions will then become habits. So thank you for joining and participate in this. You can join us online on Facebook Live. We're running this live. Just search on Facebook Anti-Fragility Health Clinic, and you will see the notice for this workshop today. The 5th of June, is it? 5th of June today? 5th of June, sorry, 6th of June, you see? We've been in lockdown and I'm losing my sense of time. Today, the 6th of June, you'll find out the workshop materials have been loaded on, and you can download that. You can also ask questions because there are people here, Jackie and Mike, monitoring online, and so if there are any questions, we're going to take those, plus the people who are in the room, we're going to address those questions. So let's just take a step back and look at what we're looking at today. So at Anti-Fragility Health, we focus on what we call the underlying causes of chronic illness, which actually create what we call clinical imbalances. One of the most important clinical imbalances is cardiometabolic imbalances. And that's what we're going to be talking about today, these cardiometabolic imbalances. So, and as you know, cardiometabolic is the biggest killer in America. It's also a really very complicated area of health. As you're going to find out, the biomarkers that indicate good or not good health or understanding cardiometabolic risk is very, very challenging, even for the very, very experienced cardiologist. And therefore, it is pertinent and necessary that everybody understands it so they can also understand what's really going on in their body. It's very, very important, so that when your doctor is talking, you actually understand, because you're the one who's living with that overall architecture of your cardiometabolics. So again, at our last workshop, we walked through a couple of things that we look at, and there were a couple of things. Let me just remind you, and this was available for download. We start with looking at your lipids, right? Your lipids, they're the fats, HDL, LDL. I'm going to put that in another context today. Then we look at inflammation, which we're looking at the blockage, and we're going to talk about that. That blockage is caused by the sugar. We look at that under metabolics. When there's a lot of sugar in your blood, it wounds the lining of the artery, and then the body comes to repair that, and that's what leads to that inflammation and the accumulation of cholesterol in those areas. And then some of the underlying genetics of how different things around your health would affect that. So let's go now to my whiteboard that I've put some topics up for conversation. So there are really, when we look at cardiometabolic risk, there are actually two things that we're looking at. One of the things that triggers cardiometabolic risk is what we call insulin resistance. And insulin resistance, we're going to look at, let's look at a slide here that talks about insulin resistance, and you get a sense. for what, if you can focus on that, on what generates insulin resistance, right? It starts with having constant high glucose in the blood. Then there's a constant high insulin demand from the pancreas, right? And then the insulin receptors, because of this high demand, become resistant. And when they become resistant, then you have this craving for more glucose and for high insulin, and you build this cycle, which is a very big challenge in our culture today. This is a very, very important issue. When you eat a high carbohydrate diet with a lot of sugar, there's a demand, pressure on the pancreas to produce more insulin, and the production of that insulin then puts a lot of stress on the insulin because it's continuous, right? Like some people drink 5 bottles of Coca-Cola a day. That's really a lot of sugar in the blood. That puts a lot of pressure in the pancreas to remove the sugar from the blood. That's what insulin does. It binds to remove the sugar in the blood to take the glucose, glucose, to the cells where they are being used, right? And if the cell cannot use it, then it converts it to fat or send it somewhere else for storage, where it stores in the blood or in the liver and in a couple of other places. That resistance that comes from the pancreas being overworked, right? Just like Pauline being overworked by her mother, she's going to become stubborn and resistant. That's what happens to the pancreas. It's overworked, so it becomes resistant, and therefore it's dying because it cannot meet up to the demand. That's where the resistance is. The functionality of the pancreas is falling, the demand for insulin stays high, and that gap between the amount of insulin that can be produced, sit down quickly, no distractions, right? The amount of insulin that can be produced and the demand for that insulin is what creates that resistance. It's very important. A lot of people don't understand insulin resistance. It's really one of the fundamental triggers for cardiometabolic risk. So let's look at that diagram once more again. It really starts from other health problems, but we want to focus here on where it really starts. That looks like Karen when she was younger, biting into some McDonald's or In-N-Out burger, thinking it's healthy. And when she keeps eating that burger with fries and what is that shake called? The strawberry shake or cookies and cream shake and all the nonsense that we mix into it. And that's what makes us celebrate the fact that we're American. We have this ability to have all the sugar, right? So there's a constant high level of sugar in the blood. I already showed you what sugar does to the arteries. When sugar is in the blood, it wounds the lumen or the intima of the arteries. And that wounding generates inflammation in the body to try and heal that wound. And the healing of that wound is what leads to the accumulation of cholesterol or fat to try and respond to that inflammation. So that constant high demand of glucose in the blood on the pancreas now needs to produce insulin, and then it overworks those insulin cells, and then the cells die, and then overall the response becomes resistant. You need to understand what that means. The response becomes resistant. And what is the response becoming resistant? It becomes resistant to the demand. Sugar is here. We can only produce this amount of insulin. So there is this gap of sugar in the blood that doesn't have insulin to remove it. So that is what we mean by resistant. Now you have excess sugar in the blood. The liver takes it and turns it into fat because there is nowhere else for that sugar to go. So that's why you become a fatter boy. You can see that he's growing fatter, and the more fatter he grows, he demands more sugar. And that's where the cycle just spins around and around, and it becomes worse, right? So number one topic insulin resistance is the number one area in which we explore, right? That's not the only one, but let's just look at, and there are some key markers when we're looking at your blood to see that there are certain biomarkers that would indicate to us that you're already insulin resistant. Let's look at them. Your triglycerides, that's the normal fat that you have, long chain, short chain fatty acids that typically would come from food, or like omega-3s that you take. Those things are elevated because they are in the blood. They should not be in the blood. When you take them, they should be sent to where they need to be used, right? For the different things that we use for, and we'll talk about some of that. Then you have a large number of LDL particles. Those particles are the particles that take cholesterol into the cells. So it's elevated because they are like, we need to work harder. And then the small density LDL is also elevated. These are the ones right inside the cellular level that are actually carrying fat or cholesterol across the cellular boundaries. They're also elevated. Then you have the particles. Overall LDL particles are elevated, right? Last time we talked about what LDL is. LDL is the lipoprotein that actually carries cholesterol into the cell, right? And HDL is the bigger high density. So we have low density lipoproteins are the small ones that carry into the cell. The high density lipoproteins are the ones that take it to the liver and bring it to the liver into the bloodstream for the small ones to take it into the cell. So we have the high density lipoproteins, which we call the good ones, because if you have more of them, it means that they are doing the big work of reverse, taking it to the liver, carrying it from the kidney back to the liver, and from the liver back into our bloodstream. And when it's in our bloodstream, the LDL, right, the low density ones, you see they're carriers. They're carrying the fat on their backs, right, so they can carry it into the cell. That's their job. And this is a very complex molecule. It's a combination of a lipid and a protein. That's why we call them a lipoprotein. Low density, not very good, even though we need them. So if they accumulate in the blood, that's not a good thing. It means you have too much fat to carry cholesterol. And the high density lipoproteins, the good ones, because it means they're doing their job very well of carrying fat back and forth to the liver and to the kidney for all that process of cleaning up your fat and storing and optimizing our fat. Very, very important, critical architecture for our overall health. Really critical. That's why the cardiometabolic risk is such a big issue. I hope you're understanding. So when you have insulin resistant, you have low HDL. Your HDL falls, right? Because they cannot cope with so much fat in your blood because of insulin resistance. We just saw that there. You're eating too much because when there's extra sugar, the body is converting it into fat. And there's so much fat that the liver is tired of storing it. So it leaves most of it in the blood. And that's why you see the triglycerides and the LDLs are all elevated. So that's a critical sign that you have insulin resistance when the specific biomarkers are all elevated. Very, very important. So when you're reading your charts, you're going to look at those numbers and you begin to know something is wrong, right? Then there are some people who don't have insulin resistance, but they also have cardiometabolic risk, and we can look at specific things, biomarkers also, and it's indicated, right? So some people don't have insulin resistance, but they still have underlying risk, and we'll explore some of that today. So let's look at some of the things that we've been talking about. How do you measure insulin resistance, right? Very easy. The first one is just measuring glucose in your blood. Very important that everyone should have a sense, and we offer that free test here in the clinic where we prick your hand and we can look at where the amount of glucose in your blood is. Very important that the glucose in your blood stays within a certain range of what we call between 70 and they say optimally 85. That's the upper limit and that's the lower limit. So when you're fasting, that is where your glucose should be. When you're fasting, that's why we call it the fasting glucose measurement. When you're not fasting, your glucose should go up, but it should come back into that zone. And what do you think is going to bring it back into that zone? It's the insulin that removes it from the bloodstream and brings the sugar level down again. Is that making sense? So it's very important that when you have diabetes, your sugar is outside of that range. Why is it outside of that range? Because you already have developed insulin resistance. Let's go back to this because a lot of people don't understand. When you have diabetes, already your pancreas is already destroyed. So you have insulin resistance and you continue to eat sugar. So the amount of glucose in your blood continues to stay high. Continue to stay higher than that. Normal people, you eat, immediately you eat, we do that test. 2 hours after you eat, we measure the sugar in your blood. It might get up to 100 or 120. 6 hours later, we measure, it should be back within the range. That is what keeps you healthy. If your body cannot do that, because the mechanism that God architected knows how to manage that and how to drive this process. It's a very important process. And that's why you notice when we're going to talk about lifestyle, we recommend a low carbohydrate diet. It's very critical. Except you are a performing athlete, you cannot eat high carbohydrate diets. Why do athletes need it? Because they need that high glucose in the blood, and then the blood will take it to the muscles because there's a demand for sugar to use as energy. That is then creates lactic acid. But if you're not exercising and you're eating carbohydrate, you develop insulin resistance. You notice that's why most people who play sports, after they retire, they've built an appetite for carbohydrates and it's difficult to give up that appetite. And typically they end up having diabetes. Very, very important. So let's look again. So that's the insulin measurement. We also measure insulin. We also measure what we call HOMA. And we also measure the ratio of HDL over LDL to give us a sense of what's actually happening with regard to that overall insulin resistance. So it's a very important topic that you understand what insulin resistance is. And most people who now live in the Western world and most people who lived in the old times, this was the big issue that killed a lot of rich people and kings, even in the old days, because they ate a lot of sweets, they ate a lot of carbohydrates, because we also think that eating sweets means you're enjoying life. Chocolate and all that nonsense. And it actually helps with people who are depressed, they love sweet things, people who are tired, they want comfort food, people who are cold. So there's a lot of triggers in our body that pushes for us to go for high glucose requirements. Okay, number 2, measuring your overall diabetes risk, right? Diabetes is a very challenging illness in that once you become diabetic, it is very, very difficult to reverse diabetes. And the reason is because diabetes creates significant what we call macro and microvascular damages. By the time you're diabetic, over 50% of your pancreas is already destroyed. At that point, you've already developed a lot of what we will call, let me show you on the liver, you would have created a lot of fatty acids deposits on your liver, and we call that steatosis. and we have measurements for that. And that steatosis, the accumulation of fat in the liver, actually leads to an illness that's called non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. And that's what leads to liver cancer, ultimately. So having too much sugar, right, the accumulation of all of that leads to significant damages down the line. That's why diabetes is such a dangerous illness, because it would lead to heart disease, it leads to pancreas disease, it leads to liver disease, it leads to eye blindness, it leads to amputation, it leads to so many complications. And diabetes, today, 100 million Americans suffer from pre-diabetes or diabetes. And this estimation is that by 2025, more than 50% of Americans will have diabetes. So this is not a joke. It is one of the most serious illnesses, chronic illnesses, that's plaguing most people in the world. And what is it? Because of the fact that we are trying to eat the way our grandparents used to eat. Our grandparents did not sit all day in front of computers or lock themselves in their room all day playing games like Pauline, right? Our grandparents were out in the farm all day working hard to make a living. They didn't have a car. They might have a bicycle. They walked long miles to go to the market to fetch water. They were very active. And so that diet of carbohydrates, of eating rice, eating noodle, eating corn, eating beans, that diet was very good for that active lifestyle. We are the generation of the privileged. Let's count in a couple of ways. We drive cars. We don't like walking. Even when we go shopping, we want to park next to the store. We just hate exercise. We don't sleep well because we eat too much. And our digestive systems don't work, and we like just sweet things. We eat only what we like. We don't eat what we need, right? Isn't that the American way? I don't like it, right? I don't like it. It's become the emotional response that drives a whole nation. Also, we love sugar. And so now, even Korean food, they have to add sugar. If not, Americans will not eat it, because sweet or salty is the only way we survive. My grandmother taught me that the foods that were bitter were actually very good for you. Most of my children will not eat anything that's bitter or spicy. And spicy and bitter food is actually very good for you. And finally, stress is one of the things that's killing us. And stress triggers cravings. And if you look at my grandparents, they were never stressed. They didn't have money and they didn't need money. But today, we have a lot of other things that are driving that. So when we look at the measurements of diabetes, when we look at your glucose at D-pectin and insulin levels, that begins to tell us, so you need to stay on top of that. And what are the good numbers for HbA1c? The best numbers for HbA1c is between 5 and 5.3. It can go as low as 4 point something, but 5.3 is the max. I am at 5.6. I consider myself pre-diabetic. And the minute I got to 5.6, I panicked. And that is when I really woke up. I'm like, this is bullshit. I need to do something about this quickly. If you don't know your number and your doctor tells you that at 6.0 you're fine, that's a lie. You're on your way down and you're on your way out. That's why most people have tingling in their hands and feet, numbness, cramps, and a lot of other things. Those are beginning signs that you have microcirculation issues, and microcirculation comes from complications of cardiometabolics. The accumulation in your arteries that reduces blood flow and therefore causes high blood pressure, and also the dying of your arteries and veins in the extremities because of the low blood supply and the non-availability of nutrients, leading to neuropathy and the pain and tingling that we feel in our feet and hands, right? So let's look at dyslipidemia. I'll show you a slide on dyslipidemia. So all these very complex illnesses, right? And dyslipidemia, as you can see, it's just the accumulation of fat in the arteries. So those red things are red blood cells, and they are red because they're carrying oxygen. When they give up their oxygen, they become dark, right? And that's the blood that flows in your veins. Your arteries carry really high red potent blood because they're carrying oxygen. And that oxygen they're taking to the cells, and that's what is used to generate energy in the ATP cycle, Krebs cycle, that gives us the ability to be alive, right? So you see the red blood cells are constrained by all this fat that is beginning to accumulate in our arteries and therefore begin to cause a lot of problems. So dyslipidemia is one of the things that we also measure, and then we also measure inflammation. And what is inflammation? As I mentioned before, inflammation results from the wounding of the intima by the sugar in the arteries that causes the accumulation. You have inflammation that may damage your artery wall lining, and this is how blockages form. So you have a wound, the body responds with inflammation, there's an accumulation of fat in that area. You can see it when you have a wound and the wound is healing. One of the first things that you see showing up in that wound is the accumulation of fat, because fat comes to protect the environment while the growth cells and the cytokines are rebuilding the architecture of the wall. That becomes chronic. Why does it become chronic? Because if you continue eating sugar, it continues wounding the same wound, right? It's like scratching the scab of a wound that is healing. And that continuous wounding because of the sugar causes chronic inflammation in the arteries. And that is what causes the big problems that we're looking at, right? And then we can measure that inflammation. So when homocysteine or CRP is high in your blood, it shows that you have a lot of inflammation. Inflammation doesn't mean that you're bloated. Inflammation means that there is a lot of stuff going on in your body trying to quench the fires, right? A lot of things in our body causes inflammation, and we will talk about some of that as we start looking at some of the lifestyle interventions. So do we have any questions so far as we walk away from diagnostics? Mike, are there any questions online?
Yes. How do I know if I'm insulin resistant?
Well, you have to come to my clinic, right? You cannot sit at home and imagine yourself insulin resistant. So if you're insulin resistant, you would look like this guy that we were showing. You would look like that. You would have that kind of lifestyle. So if you live like that and you have periods of craving, that's a big sign. You're always thirsty, you're always hungry, and you're always craving food. That's the sign that you know you're insulin resistant, right? Because normal people are not hungry all the time. And why are you hungry all the time? Because the body has all this sugar. You see, you have starving cells. There's a high glucose level, high insulin. The cells are not getting the sugar. They're not getting the nutrients because you've killed the pancreas. So you're always starving. And then they go to the buffet and they eat like pigs. They load their plates when you go to Vegas. And sometimes you look at the plate and you wonder, wow, can all of that food go into one person, right? So that kind of craving already is an indication to you that you're insulin resistant. But more important, you want to come to the lab and we run your blood and your diagnostics and we see where your levels are, Was there any other question? Yes.
If someone born with dysfunction of pancreas, are they automatically diabetic?
Correct. That is the indication for type 1 diabetes, where they already have insulin resistance genetically. So you can trigger insulin resistance from genetics, that's type 1 diabetes, so they have to be on insulin all their lives, or you can trigger it from your lifestyle. Very good question.
But for type 1 diabetic, we cannot reverse it.
No, you cannot, except you get a new pancreas. Yeah, type 1 diabetics have to be on insulin for life. Or the interesting things like stem cell that could rebuild and repair the architecture of the pancreas. That's a solution to that. But most of that is still under research. So you either get a new pancreas or you use stem cell to repair and regenerate the old pancreas. So, but that comes with a genetic problem with regard to the Isles of Langerhans. So if you look at the pancreatic architecture, it has these little islets, and that is where insulin is produced when they sense the amount of sugar in the blood, right? When the amount of sugar in the blood is above 85, it triggers insulin release. And then the insulin comes and packs that sugar and takes it into the cell or into the liver for processing, right? But when you have insulin resistance, you don't have any more insulin. That's why people with type 2 diabetes are given insulin to remove it. And what happens in our culture is that they don't tell you to stop eating sugar. So a lot of people think that when they're taking their type 2 diabetes medication, they have cured their diabetes. No, they have not. What they've done is that they've just lowered the rate at which you're destroying everything else. They've just slowed down the rate. Is that very important you understand that? There is no cure for diabetes except you reverse it, except you stop eating sugar. But this is the problem. So when I say reversal, it's very important you understand that. When we stop you from eating carbohydrates, you get on a ketogenic diet, we're going to talk about it, we are reversing you by removing a lot of glucose from your blood. But the pancreas that has been destroyed, we cannot repair it unless we do stem cell or you get a new pancreas. So all the destruction, and that's why if you look at the research and the literature, that it is very important that as soon as you become or you're getting close to being diabetes, you change your lifestyle, and we're going to talk about that immediately. But once you've been diabetic for some time, it is very difficult, especially if you're already on dialysis or you already have neuropathy or diabetic wounds and things. It's a very dangerous place. And what's happening is that when you're already in that stage, there's so much sugar in your blood. And what do you think happens? The sugar then goes and sits down in your feet. So you have swollen feet full of sugar, and the bacteria begins to. And that's why you develop diabetic sores, and then your feet smell terribly because the bacteria loves all that sugar in your feet, right? And that's really where it begins to lead towards amputation. So it's very important that food hygiene is important as part of the way in which we also treat diabetes.
I have a question.
Yes.
At what age should you get your blood sugar tested?
At any age. Actually, there are children today. We have studies upstairs for teenagers who are diabetic. In America today, we have 14, 15-year-olds who are diabetic already because they've been drinking Coke from the day they were born. And they drink Coke every day and they eat McDonald's. So most people already at teenage levels are already diabetic. So let's be very clear. So when we say people are diabetic, we're talking about type 2 diabetes and type 1 diabetes management. So there are two different kinds. So both require insulin, but this one is genetic and this one is from lifestyle. Okay, it's very important that we're clear. Did I answer that question?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so let's move ahead and now talk about lifestyle interventions. Was there any other question online, Mike? All right, let's talk about lifestyle interventions. So we're going to talk about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 things, and we're going to talk about it in the context of nutrients. So let's start with the big one, nutritional biochemistry. I'm not calling it diet, but we encompass a whole series of things when we talk about nutritional biochemistry. It has to do with food. So let's start. The first one is time-restricted feeding. Time-restricted feeding is very, very important because our metabolism is driven by what we call circadian rhythms. The circadian rhythms is triggered by the sun. So there are two things that trigger circadian rhythms. Two things: sun and food. Our nutrient sensing architecture and our light sensing architecture are the two most important drivers of our rhythms. Very, very important. And therefore, our metabolism is driven by light. I meant sunlight. I didn't mean electrical light. Sunlight. The body knows the difference. How does the body know the difference? It can read the amount of lumen in the light touching the skin. And it knows, that's electric light, that's the sun. The body tells the difference. It can read the lumen intensity. Okay, it's very important. That light triggers, but sometimes you can deceive the body when you have a light on in your room all night. The body is confused. Is it day? Is it night? Is it morning? Right? So it can cause some confusions. So it's very important that you eat only when the sun is up. That's when the body is optimized for activity. When the sun is down, the body is optimized for rest and repair and restoration. That's the biology of it. You can devise your own brain around that. Some people say, I'm a night person. That's bullshit. Where you actually work during the day and you sleep at night. If not, you're going to develop significant metabolic dysfunction. That's the way we were architected. So it's important that you eat only when the sun is up. So when we talk about time-restricted feeding, but when the sun is down, eating must stop. At that point, you can only drink tea, coffee, or water. That's it. When the sun is up, that's when you can eat. Very important. They've run a lot of exercises on this. People were eating the same amount and the same food just during the light hours, and the other people were eating whenever they wanted, and the weight gain was significant between the two populations, which tells us very clearly that our metabolism is optimized for specific time for us to eat. That's number one. Number two is fasting. The body needs fasting. It uses fasting for healing, for cleaning, and for detoxing the body. Right? There's an issue called autophagy. The body uses fasting to actually take out senescent cells that tend to become carcinogenic or become cancer forming. And so fasting is recommended either once or twice a month. And when I say fasting, I mean 24-hour fasting. And so it's becoming a very, very important way of keeping yourself healthy, right? I know that Christians and Muslims and other religions have instituted fast as a way of bringing the body, the mind, and the spirit closer together in our submission to the Almighty. It's a very important teaching from the ancients about fasting. Fasting allows you to take control of your body. Fasting is a way to kill that cravings that we talk about because you can control it. And so you use fasting to actually take control of your body. So a lot of people would tell you that they cannot fast. It's because they suffer from that. So if you cannot fast, you might have insulin resistance. And so it's important that we learn to fast, because fasting is very, very important for the architecture of our bodies, right? That was the second one. The third one is what we call CR. That's calorie restriction, right? So if you do your body composition with us, it's going to give us your basal metabolism and your active metabolic rate. And that's the amount of calories that you need when you're resting and the amount of calories you need that when you're active. So it gives you a daily amount. Overall, for men, it's about 2,000 a day. For women, it's about 1,500. But, you know, there's an old adage from Buddhism that says that that is the optimal amount when you're 20 years old. By the time you're 40, you should be taking half of that, which is 1,000 calories a day. By the time you're 60, you should be taking half of the 1,000, which is 500 a day. By the time you're 80, you should be on half of that, which is 250 calories a day. So a low-calorie diet is very important because it actually keeps you healthier, because the body uses too much energy to metabolize. I didn't say nutrients, I said calories, right? The body still needs the same amount of nutrients, but it requires lower amounts of calories. So it's very important that in American culture, people confuse the difference between calories and nutrients. So nutrient amounts stay the same, but the caloric amount goes down as you grow older. If you don't comply to that, you get ill in your 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s. That's why chronic illness is rampant in those ages. There are some other things like hormones, but one of the big problems is because at 40, you're still eating as you ate at 20, and at 60, you're still eating as you ate at 40 and at 20. And those amounts of calories are too high. Finally, we have what we call diet restriction. And diet restriction is exploring the whole area of what we are calling now Mediterranean diets or ketogenic diets. And you need to use those diets very carefully because it has to be aligned with your overall biochemistry. So some people love ketogenic diets, but you cannot be on those diets all the time because it also causes some injury. The body needs sugar, some sugar. As you notice when we looked at those sugar levels, it has to be between 85 and 70. And sometimes when people are on ketogenic diets, their sugar levels might fall below 70. And that causes illnesses of its own when there's not enough sugar in the body. So it's not that sugar is bad. Like everything else in life, it has to be at the right amount. Not that fat is bad, but it has to be the right amount. Not that proteins are bad, it has to be the right amount. If you don't eat proteins, you're going to waste away. You don't have muscle, you don't have connective tissue, and if you don't eat enough fats, you become stupid because most of your brain is fat, right? There'll be nothing in there. It'll be like what? Like a chocolate shake or like scrambled eggs, and you will always be called stupid, right? So if you don't eat good fats, and let's look at some of those good fats, right? Where are my fats? All right, so we have two options of those fats. We have two options of them. We have the EPA DHA, which is the omega-3, and this one is from fish oil. It's fish oil from the good fishes, anchovies, sardines, salmons. Those are the good fishes, and it is very good. And if you look at the price, it's a beautiful price, more expensive than the cheap ones you buy from Costco or from those other places where they give you rancid fish oil. But you know, you're American, you don't know what rancid is. It's bad fish oil. If it's smelling of fish oil, it's rancid. That's the test. So if you go and you smell the fish oil, it's bad. And I know how much you pay for it, $10. Good luck. This one is from flaxseed. So vegetarians who cannot eat fish oil then take the flaxseed oil, which is the omega-3 that is got from plants, from flax seeds. So that's the option, flaxseed from plants or omega-3 from fish, right? That compensates for people who are vegetarian and not vegetarian. So when we go back to the diet restriction, right, some people say, how do I get my nutrients when I cannot eat all the things I need? So we're going to talk about that. That's why I have this line of supplements here to talk about later. Now let's talk about sleep. Right, sleep is one of the biggest issues of our time. A lot of people, if you don't sleep following the circadian rhythm, it screws up your overall biological clock. That's the key thing. The clock gets out of whack, right? The body has a 24-hour clock. And that clock is a very important clock that you follow the rhythm, right? It's very important you maintain some good habits. Go to bed around 8 or 9 p.m. and wake up around 5 or 6 a.m. Once you do that, you begin to find out that you feel good. You feel strong, you feel happy because you've slept well. You've slept at least for 8 to 9 hours. Very important that you sleep when the sun is down. Sleeping during the day is good, but it does not compensate for sleeping at night. So it's very, very important that you sleep when the sun is down and you're awake when the sun is up. Naps are also good. I take naps when I can. They're also good because they're restorative. They allow the body to reset and to really calm down. So sleep is a critical part of us being healthy, because when we're sleeping, the body cleans out all the waste. Think about it. That's why when you get up in the morning and you drink your warm lime water or lemon water, you begin to think, I want to poo. Because the poo has accumulated from all the things you ate the day before. And when you go, it will be like a number 4 gentle poo. It's like you're singing a Beethoven classic, right, in the bathroom. So it comes from you sleeping properly, plus I should have added hydration, because water, hydration, also makes that poo come out gently, right? Because if you're not properly hydrated, then you'll be like Luke doing, right? You'll be squeezing, and then you'll be like, oh shit, let me take a breath. Then you squeeze again, right? Because you were not properly hydrated. So you'll be constipated. So it's very important that you hydrate well so you can release that poo properly. And then if you eat around 10 or 11, you're going to find out that you want to poo around 4 or 5. That's your second poo of the day. And then if you eat around 5 or 6, the next morning you want to poo. So you begin to go into a 2-poo cycle. A 2-poo cycle is a good cycle, a 2-poo cycle. Not like those babies who poo all the time. I mean, you are grown up now, so a 2-poo cycle, a soft, long sausage poo. It's a long sausage poo. It's your poo. Why are you shy? Look, it's a good poo. When you poo, you should look at your poo. Was that a number 4, or was that a number 2, or a number 6? If it's a number 6, you're getting diarrhea. If it's a number 2, you're constipated, right? The poo is telling you. So look at your poo and get the message from the poo so you can fix it. Now let's go to exercise. Exercise is not like we have a choice. Some of you think that if I watch people exercising on TV, it's the same as exercising. Exercise means that you get off your ass and you go exercise. The only way that the body builds muscle is from exercise and from the available amino acids in your diet. If you don't exercise, your muscles begin to decay, and that could also lead to diabetes, right? Because if there is no muscle for the blood to take sugar to so that it can use, then it has to store it. That's why lack of exercise makes you fat, makes you diabetic. You understand? Because the muscle is the one that consumes the sugar, right? So if you're not exercising, but you love sugar, you're going to be a fat boy or a fat girl. And we're going to call you that even though we don't call it to your face. When you turn your back, we'll say, Luke is now a fat boy. And you have to deal with it. And you can go cry in your room and deal with it, but we will call you a fat boy behind your back. Or like I tell my daughter, Karen, wow, you're growing fat. And then she's not happy with me for a couple of days. But you know I'm her father. She has no choice. So exercise is really critical in addressing some of these cardiometabolic issues. That's why doctors will recommend that you exercise about 30 minutes to an hour every day on average. It's very important because the exercise also removes sugar from your blood. So it's a very good way to actually make sure you don't develop insulin resistance. Toxicity. Toxicity, the organs and fat stores the toxic elements because they extract it from our bloodstream to protect us from those toxic elements. But the fact that they are being held inside makes the fat difficult to be broken down. And so detoxing allows you to break that fat. And you could see from our detoxification chart here, it tells you that detoxification is better than diet. Fat is created to protect the body from toxins and impurities, which creates unwanted weight, right? Dieting, which is calorie cutting and exercising, results in fat loss, increasing toxic density. The toxic density then results in rebounding because as the toxic overload increases, it triggers the body need to create fat and weight is regained. That's why diets do not work, because they release the toxins, but the toxins have to be locked up, and therefore the body creates fat to lock up the toxins. So if you do not detox, the weight stays. So true detoxification removes toxins from the body, creates lean muscle, and releases excess fat, maintaining a clean balance that keeps the body naturally lean and reduces the toxic burden. So detoxing is a critical element in addressing this vicious cycle of inflammation and the insulin resistance. So when you detox, right, it removes that fat. You now have muscle that can take up some of this sugar, and therefore we don't need that much insulin in the blood, and therefore it lowers everything and you are healthier. So a regular monthly or 3-monthly detox or a daily detox is critical, and we have some detox products here that we can show you later. Now let's look at our nutrient deficiency. Jacqueline, can you bring me the detox, the 7-day? Let's look at our nutrient deficiency. You know that our food system does not have enough nutrients. So the government has given us, do I have the RDA list, Dr. Yee? Could I have a list? So the government, I know you love the government, you liberals. You love government control. So the government created one for you because knew that you were not going to be really smart right? You can't figure this shit for yourself. So the government created one just for liberals by the FDA, because you all need a lot of government support. And if we didn't create it, you would say we have injustice. We are not really providing you what you need to be healthy. So, and I know that even after the government created this, you still don't read it. So if you look at the RDA, we have it published, and you can Google this on the internet. Is called Nutritional Education, fda.gov, Nutritional Education, or you call the RDA is the recommended daily allowance for nutrients. It has vitamins. We're going to talk about those vitamins. You see them lined up there. It has minerals. It has minerals and minerals. So let's look at that stuff. So in our alpha-based product, we have a full spectrum multivitamin, high concentration of fish oil, and a bioactive antioxidants. Look at that list. My God, when you take one packet of these things, there is this celebration. Remember what they say in the Bible when you find a lost son? When these nutrients arrive in the cell, there is jubilation that finally this American has provided us nutrients, right? So it's very, very important that you look at the nutrients you're getting, and it's really amazing that when we take this list and you match it to this box, you know, after Luke started taking this, he doesn't eat anymore. He's now like, I got it. I'm not hungry anymore. I am fine because I got all my nutrients. Or, you should have seen Dr. Yi's dad yesterday. He loves the liquid ones. That's what we call Vibe. Look at what it's got. All those things that we're talking about. This is a very, very important nutrient, and it's bio-ready liquid. When you take a liquid supplement, for people who don't like capsules, they absorb, or what we call the bioavailability of the liquid is higher than the capsules, right? But you know there's a taste issue, and so we try to flavor it to meet your taste, right? It has antioxidant, minerals, and vitamin concentrate. So they put these fruits here just to make you feel good, right? That it's going to taste good, okay? Then we have the one for the lazy people or the poor people who don't have a lot of money. We have what we call the Physician's Daily, and we have the core minerals. This is all very, very good for you. And these are vegetarian options that you can take. This is what we call our RDA, the recommended daily allowance. We also add the fish oil that I spoke to you about before, the flaxseed and the fish oil. And then we add two important things that are really critical for people who are growing older, the probiotic and the digestymes. So these digestive enzymes are really critical as you grow older, that you support your system with digestive enzymes, and the probiotic, which helps in maintaining your bacterial diversity. And if you look at some of the recent research, it shows that if you have good bacterial diversity, it actually helps with your mind. And perhaps that's why I'm so smart. I have really good bacteria in my GI tract, right? Can you bring me a prebiotic? And then let's look at vitamin D, the big boy. 95% of Americans are short on vitamin D. And this is a critical component even for your immune system. So in these days of COVID-19, you should be taking. I take the 10,000 every day. It comes with K, very critical because it's fat soluble, water soluble. But some people go for the higher doses. Dr. E, can you help her get the prebiotic? With some people go for the higher doses of the 50,000 unit. right? Very critical that you are able to do that. So that is our RDA, right? Very important that you get the basic. But there are two things that drive chronic illness, and we have explored some of that. Number one is inflammation. Throughout our body, injury is happening. Imagine with all that glucose flowing through our blood, it's causing a lot of injury inside our body. So there's a lot of inflammation. Plus, we eat a lot of bullshit, causes inflammation in our stomach. That's why we have bloating, we have gas, we have indigestion, we have all those things causing inflammation. And so it is important that you actually increase the amount of fish oil you take. This is critical for inflammation because it calms down inflammation. We have some more, so we actually recommend you take more fish oil than required. You cannot overdose on fish oil, on flaxseed oil. Actually, in the mornings, whenever I have breakfast, I will have non-fat yogurt plus flaxseed and a small teaspoon of honey. So I take my omega-3 in very different ways. I also eat fish. I take extra fish oil, and I also take SPM. Can you bring me SPM? SPM is one of our very important supplements also in managing inflammation. So you're going to look at that shortly. And then the second thing that causes illness is oxidative stress. So yes, thank you, Jacqueline. So look at SPM. This SPM is a very, very expensive supplement that we have. That's $120 for 120 soft gels. So it's $1 per soft gel. Very expensive, but it is really important research for reducing inflammation, what we call for modulating inflammation. Actually, I have some latest research that one of the ways to fight COVID-19 is to reduce your inflammation, what we call the inflammasomes. When you reduce the inflammasomes, the COVID-19 virus cannot find places to land. So we know that reducing your inflammation is very important in reducing your risk for actually catching COVID-19. And there's research to support that. As vitamin D also is critical for COVID-19, as is vitamin C, vitamin E, vitamin A, zinc, selenium, manganese and copper, and all those beautiful things. Like curcumin, they're all important. That's something else for fighting inflammation. Turmeric or curcumin, very, very important. And then the L-glutathione we'll be talking about when we talk about. So here I was talking about prebiotics. So if you're one of those people who struggles, like my daughter said yesterday, when you eat and you have to poo immediately, you're wasting my money. When you eat, it has to take 4 to 6 hours for you to poo. We want the food to circulate and extract the nutrients. So you need a prebiotic to slow down, right? Because you're eating too fast and then you're pooing too fast. So we want to slow that down, okay? Very important. So that even though you're wasting your money, because what's the point eating and pooing? You want to eat, let the food digest, let the nutrients get extracted before you go display that nonsense in the bathroom, right? So we have a lot of fiber products. It's very important that you take fiber. Fiber is important because it nourishes the bacteria in the GI tract and it slows down metabolism. The slowing down of metabolism allows the body to extract all the nutrients from the food, even though you're wasting your money, right? Buying food and pooing out the food, okay? So very important that we look at how we reduce inflammation. Let's go to oxidative stress. What is oxidative stress? Oxidative stress is the stress at the cellular level for the accumulation of the waste products of creating energy. When energy, ATP, is created, it produces an exhaust called reactive oxygen species, ROS. ROS, when it accumulates, causes oxidative stress. That's what makes cells go crazy and become cancerous. So when this ROS accumulates, those cells lose control. Just like Pauline, they go crazy. I'm crazy. Then when they go crazy, if you don't calm them down, then they go lose control, right? Before you know, they're homeless, which is what cancer cells are. They go crazy and they lose control. So you want to calm down oxidative stress. How do you calm down oxidative stress? You use what we call antioxidants. Antioxidants are critical for reducing oxidative stress because what they do is that they bind to the reactive oxygen species and they're excreted. Now the cell feels just the way you do when you poo. All the bullshit has gone out. Do you understand? If your cells don't feel that way, imagine how you feel when you have not pooed. Right? You're like, you keep changing the side where you're sitting, right? Look. Then you sit like this. Oh my God. Okay, you sit like this. Oh my God. Where am I getting to the bathroom? Oh my God, it's coming, right? So that's how the cells feel when they are accumulated with reactive oxygen species. They need the release. Okay, so let's look at a couple of products that would help with, I think one of the big ones that we have here is glutathione. I don't have any other antioxidant here, or I could use the poly-MVA. The poly-MVA also is a critical product for, it's a lipoic acid mineral complex that actually also serves as a very important antioxidant. We have glutathione as capsules. We also have it as IV therapy. I take this once a week as an IV, but I also take glutathione daily as an antioxidant. So it's very important for us to reduce oxidative stress. We have another one here that is compounded, and this one you actually spray on your stomach. It's very smelly, and you rub it, and it's a very, very powerful antioxidant to actually reduce what we call oxidative stress. Don't forget that when we look at wrinkles and aging, at the core of wrinkling and aging are these two things: inflammation and oxidative stress. That's really at the core of wrinkling and aging, because the cells are inflamed and the accumulation of ROS in the cells begins to reduce their elasticity. So you find out that many Korean women rub antioxidants on their face because they're trying to reduce the oxidative stress, therefore they don't get wrinkles. So it's very important that you understand the architecture of cellular therapy, in that when you reduce inflammation and oxidative stress, every cell is happy. Then they don't get old and wrinkly and lose their plasticity, right? So now let's talk about the last point, which is lowering your cholesterol. Very, very important. How do you manage lowering cholesterol and lowering your blood sugar naturally using nutrients? So let's talk about a couple of products around that. The first product that I take, it's berberine. So berberine is also an alternative for metformin. Metformin is one of the products that people recommend. It has some side effects, but this natural one, berberine, actually reduces the glucose in your blood. So it's a very, very important aspect of your glucose metabolism. We have the ultra CLA, which is the conjugated linoleic acid. It's also very important for inflammation and managing that. But we have a couple of things. This one is about blood pressure, vasodilation. It helps with the vasodilation of your arteries, helps with lowering your blood pressure. We have niacin and lipitrol, which are very natural products. I take the niacin and the lipitrol for actually reducing the LDL numbers in your blood, right? We spoke about the LDL numbers. You want to reduce the LDL, and you want to increase the HDL. And for increasing HDL functionality, we have a product that improves HDL functionality and HDL particle size, which is very, very critical for health. So on top of that, I use the IV, what we call the Phosphatidylcholine, which is a very important bilipid, and it's helpful in extracting plaque and cholesterol out of the arterial walls. So it's a very important supplement. We have it in Plaque X, and we have it also in phosphatidylcholine. So these are some important products I wanted to talk to you about today. I know that is a lot for you to accumulate, but hey, we know that you'll be having problems with regard to that. So the video is on our YouTube channel. You can always go back and watch it and look at things that you may have missed or did not understand very well, and you can also send off questions. Or more so, you can call the clinic or come visit the clinic with your mask, with your gloves, and with your full gear for protection against COVID-19. Thank you very much. Were there any questions?
Yeah, I have a question.
Yes.
What is better in regards to getting the nutrients into your body, taking capsules or taking soluble?
Well, it depends, because not all capsules, not all nutrients are available as liquid. And because some you just cannot take as liquid. For example, you cannot take omega-3 as an IV or as a liquid. We have as liquid, but even when I drink it, can you bring that from the fridge? Let me show them. It's in the fridge, the Omega Veil. So we have omega-3 as liquid. It's kind of, you know, some of this you just want to send down very quickly. How many people have drank Chinese medicine, right? When you drink it, it's like, so that's how you're going to be behaving if everything is liquid, right? So this is a key lime smoothie. We call it Omega Veil. It's emulsified omega-3 fatty acid. It has a great lime taste. I like it, but I can't stand it all the time.
Does it work better than if you were to take it as a capsule, or does it work the same?
So it works the same. The question is what we call bioavailability, your ability to absorb it.
Okay. Not everybody has the ability to absorb it.
No, not everybody. Most people have a compromised gut, right? So their gut doesn't have the ability to absorb properly. Remember, I spoke about it. If you eat and you poo immediately, there is no time for your body to absorb. So if you have good fiber, good enzymes, good bacteria, then you have better availability, bioavailability. But liquid is easier for the body to absorb than things that it has to break down, right? Is that making sense? And that's why some people like Pauline's mother, Endang, they prefer IV, right? Because she has to just sit there for 1 hour and she can get her week's supply. So, but then she also has to take other supplements. But you know, it's expensive because our IVs cost about $150 to $200, right? So, which will give you a month's supply. So it's also a finance, bioavailability, taste. So lots of options. I know we live in America where you have about 50 options of cornflakes. So it's confounding when you look at so many options. Any other questions? Mike, was there any question online? All right. Huh?
Can fasting be a detox?
Yes. Yes. So fasting is a kind of detox. But a detox is different from fasting because detox requires you to have nutrients and enzymes. Why? Because a lot of the toxins, which are metals and biofilm, are locked in the fat. So you need to break down the fat with enzymes, and then you need nutrients to bind to those things so that you can excrete them. When you just fast without the nutrients and the enzymes, you are releasing all the poison into the body, and so you could actually get sick. So it is always good that you have detoxed before you fast so that the elements don't come out. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, one question. Is honey good for insulin resistance?
No. Sugar is sugar is sugar.
Even pure.
Can I make that clear again? Except you're eating the honeybees, which is good protein. But sugar is sugar is sugar. Sugar from fruits is bad for you. Sugar from sugar is bad from you. Sugar, carbohydrates is bad for you. So anything that converts to glucose is bad for you. Except you do it in moderation. I know people say, why can I not eat bananas? If you already have insulin resistance, see what bananas are going to do to you. If you already have insulin resistance, see what watermelon is going to do to you. That's the problem. You just don't want to get there. And how do you get there? Eating too much carbohydrate. So if you were taking, I take less than half a spoon of honey to mix in my yogurt. And I do that like once every other day. I don't take that every day. So, and I would eat like, in the morning, if I take my supplements and I feel like I have not eaten anything, I'll take an apple or half an orange with it. Just so that my body has some nutrient in it to take the supplement. You really, I was shocked when I received my report from Boston Heart Diagnostics. That was the first time, 2.5 years ago, that I realized that eating fruits had too much sugar. I mean, I thought, okay, now I know, it makes sense, but before I thought fruits were good for you. They are good for you, except if you have insulin resistance. Okay? Any other questions?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Is the only way to find out if you have insulin resistance by doing diagnostics?
Yes, because it would tell you what's really going on. Because if we're going to give you treatment, we really want to look at your biomarkers to really understand what's going on, right? Because it could be dyslipidemia, it could be diabetes, it could be just insulin resistance, right? We need to be really sure what is going on so that we can intervene appropriately, right? It could be a lot of different things that's going on. Okay? Thank you guys for watching. Come back again. Thank you. Send us questions. If you have any online, you can also send comments about how amazing I am or how unamazing I am, or concerns that you have, or other things you think we should be talking about. So do not hesitate. I'm not a liberal, so I'm not easily emotionally hurt. You can say whatever you want to say, ask any questions you have, or make any comments you want, except don't make comments about my daughter and I talking on our normal weekly show. Thank you.
Good job.
Thank you, guys.